The weirdest war. In 1932, in the vast and unforgiving outback of Australia, something truly bizarre happened. A war was declared, not against another nation, but against birds. This was the infamous Great Emu War. After World War I, thousands of Australian soldiers were given farmland in Western Australia. But the land was harsh, and just as the farmers were struggling to survive the Great Depression, a new enemy arrived, around 20,000 emus. These weren't just any birds. Emus are large, fast, and surprisingly tough. They stormed across the farmlands, trampling crops, breaking fences, and leaving destruction in their wake. For the farmers, this wasn't just annoying, it was devastating. Desperate, they turned to the government for help. So the military stepped in. Armed with machine guns and led by soldiers, the Australian Army launched an operation to wipe out the emu population. It sounded simple. Humans with guns versus flightless birds. But things didn't go as planned. The emus were smarter than expected. They moved in small, fast groups, making them hard targets. When the soldiers opened fire, the birds scattered instantly, dodging bullets with surprising agility. Some even kept running after being hit. In one attempt, soldiers mounted a machine gun on a truck to chase them down. But the terrain was too rough, and the truck couldn't keep up. Meanwhile, the emus just outran them. Day after day, the soldiers fired thousands of rounds and killed only a fraction of the birds. The operation became embarrassing. Reports suggested it took nearly 10 bullets to bring down a single emu. The birds were winning. Eventually, the military withdrew. Yes, you heard that right. The Australian Army officially lost a war against emus. In the end, the farmers had to rely on fences and bounties instead of soldiers. And the emus, they continued roaming the outback, undefeated. The Great Emu War remains one of the strangest military operations in history, a reminder that sometimes nature doesn't play by human rules. Weirdest plague. In the summer of 1518, in the quiet city of Strasbourg, something unexplainable began. It started with one woman. Her name was Frau Trophea. One morning she stepped into the street and began to dance. Not gracefully, not joyfully, but uncontrollably. Hours passed. She didn't stop. Then a full day. Then another. By the third day, her feet were bruised and bleeding, but she kept going. Soon, others joined her. At first, just a few. Then dozens. Within a week, hundreds of people in Strasbourg were dancing in the streets, unable to stop. No music, no celebration, just endless, frantic movement. This bizarre outbreak became known as the Dancing Plague of 1518. People collapsed from exhaustion. Some reportedly died from heart attacks, strokes, or sheer fatigue. Yet still, more people kept dancing. The authorities were terrified and confused. Instead of stopping it, they made a shocking decision. They encouraged it. Believing the dancers needed to dance it out, officials hired musicians and even built a stage. They thought if the afflicted kept moving, they would eventually recover. But it only made things worse. The dancing spread faster. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of people, day and night, moving uncontrollably, faces twisted in pain, bodies pushed beyond human limits. Eventually, the city reversed course. The dancers were taken to shrines, prayed over, and slowly the outbreak began to fade. But the mystery never did. To this day, no one knows exactly what caused the dancing plague of 1518. Some say it was mass hysteria triggered by stress and famine. Others believe it could have been caused by a toxic fungus affecting the brain. Whatever the truth. For one strange summer in Strasbourg, an entire city lost control of its own bodies. They danced, and some never stopped. In the year 897, in the heart of Rome, one of the strangest trials in history took place. Not for a living man, but for a corpse. This was the infamous Cadaver Synod. Months earlier, a former pope named Pope Formosus had died and been buried. But death did not spare him from judgment. His successor, Pope Stephen VI, had him dug up. Yes, his body was exhumed from the grave, dressed in papal robes and placed on a throne inside a church courtroom. Imagine the scene, a rotting corpse, sitting upright, surrounded by clergy. The trial began. Formosus was accused of serious crimes, breaking church law, seizing power illegally, and unworthy conduct as pope. But there was one problem: he was dead. So, they assigned someone to speak on his behalf. A deacon stood beside the corpse, answering questions as if the body itself were responding. The court shouted accusations. The dead pope remained silent. Unsurprisingly, the verdict was guilty. Pope Formosus was stripped of his papal status. His sacred garments were torn away. In a final act of humiliation, 3 fingers of his right hand, the ones used for blessings, were cut off. But it didn't end there. His body was thrown into the Tiber River. The cadaver synod shocked even the people of Rome. Not long after, public outrage exploded. Pope Stephen VI was overthrown, imprisoned, and eventually died under mysterious circumstances. Later popes reversed the trial, declaring it invalid, as if trying to erase this bizarre chapter from history. But they couldn't, because once in medieval Rome, a court put a dead man on trial. On a cold day in January 1919, the city of Boston was going about its usual routine. People working, aircon playing, horses pulling carts through the narrow streets. Then, without warning, it happened. A massive storage tank, filled with over 2 million gallons of molasses, suddenly burst. This wasn't just any accident. This was the Great Molasses Flood. With a thunderous crack, the steel tank exploded, sending a towering wave of thick, sticky syrup crashing through the streets at speeds estimated up to 35 miles per hour. Imagine a wall of molasses, as tall as a building, rushing toward you. There was no time to escape. Buildings were ripped apart. Horses were swept away. People were knocked off their feet, trapped, and pulled under the heavy, suffocating liquid. The molasses was so dense that moving through it was nearly impossible. And it wasn't just the impact. The cold air caused the molasses to thicken quickly, turning the streets into a sticky nightmare. Victims struggled to breathe, stuck in a sea of syrup that hardened around them. Rescue efforts were chaotic. Firefighters, police, and volunteers rushed in, but even they found it hard to move. Equipment got stuck. The ground itself seemed to trap anyone who entered. It took days to find and recover victims. In the end, 21 people lost their lives and over 150 were injured. But the disaster didn't end when the flood stopped. For weeks, Boston was covered in a sticky residue. The harbor turned brown. Streets remained slippery. And locals claimed that on hot days, you could still smell molasses lingering in the air. The Great Molasses Flood became one of the strangest and deadliest industrial accidents in history, all caused by something that seemed harmless, sweet, thick, and deadly. Weirdest political incident. In the year 1618, tensions were boiling in the heart of Prague. Religious conflict was tearing apart the Holy Roman Empire, and distrust between Protestants and Catholic rulers was reaching a breaking point. No one expected it to explode, quite like this. This was the defenestration of Prague. A group of angry Protestant nobles stormed into Prague Castle, confronting 2 Catholic officials accused of violating religious freedoms. The room was filled with shouting, accusations, and rising fury. Then suddenly, someone made a decision that would echo through history. The nobles grabbed the officials, dragged them across the room, and threw them out of a 3rd-story window. Yes, literally. The word defenestration means exactly that, throwing someone out of a window. The 2 officials, along with their secretary, plunged over 20 meters to the ground below. It should have been certain death. But unbelievably, they survived. Catholics claimed it was a miracle, that angels had saved them. Protestants had a different explanation. They said the men landed in a pile of manure. Either way, they lived. But the consequences of that moment were anything but survivable. The defenestration of Prague ignited a chain reaction of violence that spiraled into the 30 Years' War, one of the most devastating wars in European history. Millions would die. Entire regions would be destroyed, all sparked by a single act of rage, inside a room in Prague. A moment when politics stopped being words and, quite literally, went out the window.